Hello and welcome to another episode of the Dauster and Da'Sean podcast here on the Field of 68 Media Network. It is at this very moment, Sunday night, January 17th. My name is Rob Dauster. That gentleman that you see there with me is the one and only Da'Sean Butler. As you can tell, he is a former West Virginia All-American. He always has the West Virginia gear on. Da'Sean, how you doing, man? How was your weekend? How's everything?
I am doing well. The weekend was great. Tons of family time. As you already know, mid-pandemic. But me and the kids and the wife had a blast. So we've been just kicking it, bro. Just a good old-fashioned weekend here.
That's good because you didn't have any West Virginia games to watch this weekend. So you guys are on a pause. So that means we're going to be able to talk about other teams on this podcast.
Yeah, I know. And I can only imagine how happy certain people are. So I'm dedicating all my time to you guys now.
So this is the Monday Overreactions podcast. We have plenty to talk about because there was plenty that went on this weekend. Michigan got their asses kicked. Virginia kicked some asses. And, of course, there was the Ohio State-Illinois game, and that opened up a whole nother can of worms that we got to dive into. But first and foremost, I did just want to talk a little bit about Kentucky and that Auburn game and the way those things, the way that game kind of played out and the press conference afterwards played out was really interesting to me. And the reason for it is that Coach Cal has kind of tended to be something of an innovator in the college basketball space. And the reason that I say that is, he's the first guy that really kind of embraced this whole one and done model, right? Just put all your chips in the middle on the best class of freshmen, shuttle them off to the NBA, get rid of them as quick as possible, bring the next group of players in, market yourself as the program that is the best at doing that, and then get all of the best players in the country. And, there have been copycats, and it hasn't quite worked as well as it has in the past. And there has been some criticism from fans that maybe he cares about a little bit more about getting his guys to the league than he does about getting his players to play their best basketball while they're in Lexington. That's probably, neither here or there for this specific conversation. But I do think it's interesting that a guy that is that creative is still running an offense that is basically out of the 1994 playbook. And that's something that we can get into. The thing that is more interesting, though, and I want to touch on first and foremost, because I have a feeling you played for a coach that would never, ever, ever say anything like this. But one of the big controversies coming out of that game was that Dante Allen led the team in scoring in the first half, played 15 minutes. Second half came out, played just 8 minutes, got pulled in the middle of a rotation because of something. And we can get into that too. But and afterwards, he was asked about it in the post-game press conference. And what he had to say was that, hold on, I want to bring up the exact quote to make sure I don't get this thing wrong.
Yeah, don't misquote him.
He said, "I want to win every game we coach. But the other side of it is I'm not trying to take away anybody's heart." And that is something that has not sat well with many people, fans, media members, critics of Coach Cal overall. So I'm just kind of curious, when you hear a coach saying that, what does that mean to you? What is he saying right there?
Well, on first hear of it, it kind of sounded like he was trying to compromise. It almost in a sense like he was compromising himself towards the players, which, I mean, when you're the leader of a team, obviously the coach is the head of the snake for this team. You don't want to compromise your team rules, your team goals, your whatever the case is, just for the happiness of the players, because in turn, you're not really helping these younger individuals understand how life works in general. And that's one of the points of being a coach. Also, hearing that another time, and I hate going back and forth on this because, the very first time I heard it, I was just like, that just sounds like terrible. But then at the same time, if you're trying to teach and you're trying to get these guys to become better players, what can you teach them when you take their confidence away? And, obviously the winning is very important. Some people would say it's the most important thing. The same thing we have the conversation about when we talk about Coach K, and it's just all right, maybe he needs to focus on getting these guys ready for next year and have them learn the game and learn what they need to do and learn what they can do within the Duke's off. Same thing for Coach K. We have to extend him Calipari. We have to extend him that same luxury, being that, you know, he can't sit there and if Brandon Boston is like shooting 1 for 4 from 3 and Mintz is not playing his best, or whoever is not playing, Askew's not playing their best, and we know Dante Allen's he can help, and it is about Dante Allen. It is about helping Dante Allen, and you know, he's sat down for a long time as is. So, you know, you think about him, but you also can't. I don't know. It's a tough line, man. It's like one of those lines where you just can't take one of your players' hearts just to focus on the winning. Now they need wins. You know, they're in a position where they need wins. So it's like there's a line there, but if you are trying to help these kids and you are trying to help them become better players, not just worry about them getting to the NBA and worry about their stock or whatever the case may be, but just help them become better players, there's a way you can go about doing it. And you can't compromise yourself as a coach, but you also can't bury a kid and then sit there and go, well, he never turned in anything, and you just sat him on the bench. Mm-hmm. Or you did, like, you know, there's a line. So I can see in that comment that Cal put out there that he's fighting with himself on the inside with that line, trying to figure out how to do this job the best he can in the situation that him and his team is in by staying on that line. So,
yeah, I mean, it's tricky to try to balance that, right? You want to be hard on kids. You want to be able to push them. You want to be able to hold them to a certain standard. But it's also, you know, he's there on the day-to-day, right? Like he's in that practice. He sees these kids. He's in the locker room with them. And he knows kind of what their mindset is. And the bottom line is this, like, I think he's referring to guys like Olivier Sarr and BJ Boston who have not played well really at all this season. But Cal needs them to be playing well if this team is going to end up reaching their ceiling and being as good as they possibly can be. Now, the question you got to ask at some point is it worth it trying to keep getting the bet? Like trying to, I don't know if coddle is the right word, but you are kind of coddling. When you say things like this, like you're kind of coddling them, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Cal's whole mantra has been like, Kentucky is not for everybody. If you're going to come here, you got to fight for what you earn. You got to accept the role if that's what we're asking you to do. You got to do your job or you're just not going to play because that's who we are. And then all of a sudden this year when things are struggling, it's like, okay, well, we got to make sure that these guys are happy. We can't piss them off too much. We got to keep that confidence up. And that, like, those two things, it's not congruous. Like you're not, you know what I'm saying? Like they kind of go at what you're trying to accomplish. Right. And so the big thing to me is, at what point do you kind of cut bait on some of these guys and say, all right, look, this isn't working, right? BJ Boston is just, he's nowhere near the guy that we thought he was going to be coming into the season. I think he'll probably leave school after this year, but like, I don't know if he's a first round pick. I don't know, based off of what I've seen. Like, he's shooting 17% from three. He can't catch. He's a mess defensively. Like, why, like, who is going to take a risk on this kid? Like, the whole thing about him coming in was he was this long, lanky, athletic kid that could be switchable, that would be a pest defensively, that also happened to be like a really good shot maker and a really good scorer. Well, teams go at him on the defensive end because he's a mess. He's shooting 17% from three. He doesn't have the handle we thought he did. So, like, all the things that we thought he did well, he doesn't do well. So that's a long way of saying, like, at some point you kind of have to say, okay, well, in order for us to win games, and that's the thing that gets me, is like, I want to win games, but I want to win every game I coach, but, and that's the surprising part to me, is like that I understand the point that Cal is trying to make, but this is a guy that never, ever slips up in what he's saying. Like, so Gary
exactly.
Parrish,
I would say that was his big mistake. Even if he was trying to figure out a way to compromise or trying to figure out a way to toy that line and coddle, in a sense, his words are the issue, like what he's in right now. Mm-hmm. Like, everybody has his words to take out of context. So I
want to win, but and so Gary Parrish tells the story from CBS Sports. He was on our Beale Street Bullies podcast with Antonio Anderson, and what he said, like, there was one time when he was on a private flight, like he got on a private flight with Coach Cal to fly from Memphis all the way up to Bristol for when Cal was doing a guest spot in studio with ESPN on like a Tuesday night game. And he said while he was on the flight, Coach Cal was sitting there rehearsing what he was going to say, talking about like graduation rates and making points about this, that, and the third. And he actually said really like, he's like, I'm going to make sure that I say something nice about Bob Huggins and Cincinnati and their graduation rates and all of these other things. And GP was like, well, did they tell you what questions we're going to ask? And Cal's answer was no, but I'm going to say what I want to say. Like, this dude is the best at spin, the best at getting his message out there, the best at being able to manipulate a press conference to make a point that he's trying to make. Yeah. And he fucked this up. Like, there's no other way around. You can't
if you say, if you think he fucked it up, then you're saying that he's this amazing, amazing at getting his point across. Do you think this is a point he's trying to get across in general? Not to everyone else, maybe to his players, to like letting them know, like in a sense that the players that he's talking about without naming them, like, hey, like,
oh yeah, that's a good point.
I'm not turning on you in the media. I'm not going to just throw you in. There's obviously a way you can go about that. You can fall on a knife as a sword, but then then you're the one that's on the knife and people will remember that you're on the knife. With him saying these things, it's almost as if like, hey, I'm trying to manage this group here. And then obviously to the masses of people listening, like the fans. And then also to the players, like, yeah, I'm not trying to, kill these guys. Like I'm trying to like, manage them. I'm not trying, I'm saying, like the wording in which he's using, like if he's this great, like he can spin a good story the way you say he can, then this had to have some serious thought in it. And that's why when you brought up BJ Boston, it just made me think of if he's saying this stuff now and BJ Boston isn't having the greatest season, I mean, then maybe he is extending his Coach K status in a sense where maybe we need to bring this group back next year. Most of the guys that are coming back, let them see what people outside of this locker room think about them as far as NBA career, as far as anything else. And then they'll come back and then be a little bit more motivated to start their season.
That's actually a really interesting point you just made. Maybe what he's trying to say is maybe he knew, like if he knew that everybody would pick up on the I want to win every game but line, then maybe he was saying that because BJ Boston would hear it and would realize like, I want to win every game, but I have to make sure that BJ Boston still has confidence. Can you imagine hearing that as a player?
Yeah. So
that's the kind of thing where they could drive a point home. But I wanted to rewind to something. You mentioned finding a way to develop guys that are going to be there for 2 years, right? And focusing on the guys that aren't going to be heading to the professional ranks, like not worrying about a BJ Boston if he's going to be a one and done, or an Isaiah Jackson if he's going to be a one and done, or Olivier Sarr if he's going to end up being a guy that goes pro. And that actually brings us to a really good point, because I think the biggest issue, the core issue with this Kentucky team, it's not like the Dante Allen thing, right? Because I want to say something about that. Like the reason he got pulled in the second half was because, okay, first of all, Auburn went at him every time defensively. I went back and I watched the second half tape. There were 3 straight possessions where they went at him and they abused him defensively. He was a train wreck on that end of the floor. It was basically like having me out there. And when you have a guy like Dante Allen, who is such a threat to shoot the ball, his whole job is to run off of screens and be someone that can make threes. And if he's not making them, be someone that manipulates the defense with the threat of making the three. We talk about this with Duncan Robinson, right? The reason Duncan Robinson is such a weapon is because of the way defenses move when he's coming off of screens. That's what Cal wants Dante Allen to be. Now, if Dante Allen is not going to shoot when he's wide open, that's the other part about it. Like exactly. I found the play that Cal was talking about where he was pissed that Dante Allen didn't shoot. And Dante Allen came off an elevator screen and had 8 feet of space, like eight feet of space in front of him from 22 feet away, wide open. A play called for him. He has to shoot that.
And if you don't shoot it, I mean, why are you out there? Why are you out there?
Yes, because he can't do anything else well enough to be on the floor.
Exactly.
Like he ain't 3 and D. Like he's 3 and nothing else. So if you're not shooting, and it's actually, we mentioned Duncan Robinson, like he's talked about this at length. Like one of the hardest things for him was to be able to get his mind around this idea that Okay, I'm Duncan Robinson. I started at a D3 school. Now I'm out here on the same roster on the same court with like Dwayne Wade and Bam Adebayo and all of like Goran Dragic, like all stars.
Exactly.
And they want me to shoot every time I touch it. Like, what is going on? So it took him a while to get in that mindset. And like, honestly, Dante Allen is basically 6 games into his college career after listening to the first 6 weeks of the season where Cal basically said he wasn't good enough to play. So I understand if Dante Allen is kind of like working through some confidence stuff and understanding like, okay, the least selfish thing that I can do as a basketball player right now is to shoot that shot every time I get it. So I understand if he's dealing with some of that. So I just wanted to put that out there. But the core issue that Kentucky is dealing with is that they do not play a modern style. They just don't. We talked about this before. You can't play Olivier Sarr with Isaiah Jackson. You can't play Olivier Sarr with Lance Ware. You can't play Lance Ware with Isaiah Jackson. You can't play two bigs that are basically fives defensively in an era where you're like everybody is 4 out or 5 out, where everybody is spaced. And Cal has not made that adjustment. He has not gone to a lineup where, okay, we're going to focus on shooting threes because we don't have bigs that can be as dominant as Karl Anthony Towns or DeMarcus Cousins in the paint. And he hasn't made that adjustment. Now, let me ask you this. If you could take a lineup where you put Devin Askew at the 1, Davian Mintz at the 2, you gave me Dante Allen at the 3, Jacob Toppin at the 4, Keon Brooks at the 5, right? And then kind of rotated in like Lance Ware at the 5 and kind of moved your lineups around that way. But focused everything on going 5 out, super small, letting Keon Brooks play the 5, try to create mismatches, get all your ball handlers and shooters and scorers on the floor together. That will match up better with a lot of these teams like in Auburn and Alabama. And it will also give these players that are going to be back for another year, Allen, Toppin, Askew, maybe if you're lucky, even like a Isaiah Jackson, maybe if you're lucky, Davion Mintz will decide like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to the NBA. I might as well use that last year of eligibility because this year doesn't count. Like, to me, not only is that like a modern lineup, but you're developing guys that are going to be there for 2 years. So I just honestly, that's what I would do if I was Cal. You're 4-8. The fuck you got to lose.
I mean, for this season, I understand your point. I feel if he could put Keon Brooks at a 4 spot, that'll even make it a little bit better. He's not going to stray away from what his offense is. I mean, it's too late to change anything at this point now. These guys are getting accustomed to it. But if he could get some aspect of a 4-man that can step out and guard another 4, like the 4s that are out there in other teams. Like, it's not even obviously offensively, their bigs are going to give you what they're going to give you. But the issue is like them not being able to defend. Like they're not as versatile as they could possibly be 1 through 4. And it creates mismatches at 4 spots from time to time. They get beat in transition a ton of the time. And then you add the fact that they're not scoring the basketball or they're turning the ball over every other, like it just doesn't suit well. The way his offense is run, he obviously needs to go out and recruit people that fit the offense a little bit better offensively for them to score in these positions, because the offense is literally tailored for bigs to score the basketball. And then if they can't, obviously coming off of staggers and so like they have plays to get shooters the ball, but it's the way this team is kind of put together and how it started. It's just not working right now.
It's not working right now. All right. So I think that's enough about Kentucky. There's a lot of things going on there. And Coach Cal he's right about some things. He's wrong about some things. I think it's getting a little overblown. But the biggest issue is he ain't winning. And if you ain't winning and you're worried about getting guys to the league, Kentucky fans are not going to like that.